Hello everyone, Alexander Flores here, and welcome to episode 20 of Creating a Software Company. In the last video, we allowed our users to create collaboration groups. In this video, we're going to be putting that code inside of a Lambda function and then using API Gateway to call that code. We're also going to be allowing our users to view the collaboration groups that they've created also in a Lambda function with API Gateway. So here we have the code that we wrote. I commented out this function that we wrote right here to test the code. And then I also removed AWS SDK from the actual node modules because we don't need it on Lambda. Now I'm going to open this folder and I'm going to select everything inside of it and I'm going to send it to a .zip folder. Then we're going to upload this to Lambda. So before we upload it to Lambda, we want to go ahead and create a few policies. So we're going to create a policy before we actually create the Lambda function. And of course, this policy is going to give us access to use the DynamoDB functionality, which we need to access to put item, which we use right there. So we're going to select DynamoDB, we want write, and we want to select put item right here. After that, we need to tell our policy what tables we're going to be using. So we need to go over to our table here, and we want to copy the ARN, which is the Amazon resource name. Then we're going to paste it in right here and click add. This way our policy only has access to view that table. Let's review the policy. Let's give it a name. So we'll call it social-post collaboration groups. Actually, this should be puts collaboration groups. Let's create the policy. Now that it's been created, we're going to go ahead and attach that to a role, and that role we'll use on the Lambda function. So we want to select Lambda for our role, and then go to permissions. We want to select customer managed policy types, and then we want to select CloudWatch logs, so we have access to log things to CloudWatch, and then also want this right here, which is the policy we just created, social-put collaboration groups. Now that we have those two selected, let's go to review. So we're going to name the policy the exact same thing that we're going to name our Lambda function. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Let's create the role, and then let's go over to Lambda and let's create a function. So this name will be the same thing. We're going to be using node.js 8.10, and we are going to be using the role that we just created, which is this one right here. Let's create the function, then let's upload our code. Okay, so now that we're here, we can go down to the function code, and we can select from a zip file, and we'll select the zip file that we created. Then I'm going to increase the basic settings right here. I want the timeout to be 5 seconds. I just feel more comfortable with that. And then let's click on save to upload the code. Okay, now let's go to API Gateway and let's create a new resource called collaboration groups. All right, now that we have this resource, we're going to add a new method, which is going to be the post request. We're now going to search for our Lambda function that we just created, and then we're going to click on save. And we want to go ahead and accept this permission changes. Now we're going to go under method request, and we're going to change the authorization to use our Cognito user pool. And then the parameters we need are the same parameters that we passed in right here. So we want max members, engagement, followers, auto kick, all these things. So I'm going to go ahead and add those. Okay, so I went ahead and added all these, and the 3 that should be required are set to required. And I also changed the request validator to validate everything. Now let's go ahead and go back, and then let's go to integration requests. We'll go to body mapping templates, and we'll create a new template. This will be called application/JSON. Okay, so I went ahead and filled in all the required parameters that we have here. So the same name coming in through our API request will now go to our event parameter on our Lambda function. So we actually have access to these. Now we're going to set some basic headers as expected. So we have access control allow origin, and then we're going to set the appropriate integration response settings over here as well, just like that. And now this seems like it's good to go. Let's go ahead and deploy our API to the development stage. And then let's go to stages and select the post method we just created, and let's copy this invoke URL and let's try that out in our application. So I simply pasted it here at the start of the URI, and then we can get rid of this. And we can uncomment this post request right here, and let's see what happens. It seems like it started up okay. Let's refresh. Okay, let's click on this button here. Let's set the group name to our group. Max members is 20, niches will be travel, and let's click on create. So it seems like we get an error. Our message is unauthorized, and that's expected because we have to actually authorize this. So the URI will be itself, and then we have the headers, which will be authorization. We're going to pass in request.session.tokens.id token, and this way it's actually going to understand that we are authorized, we are logged into an account that's attached with our Cognito user pool. So now let's go over here, let's try again. Okay, so we have our information, let's click on create. And we now see that we get this back right here. So if we check our database, we go to items and we refresh, we now see that there's 2 of them. This one is missing some information, but that's fine. We can go in and set some defaults later on, but we now know that that Lambda function is working. We're going to go ahead and delete that group. And now we're going to make it so our users can actually view their collaboration groups right here. Okay, so I got the GET request working. Basically, we're going to be scanning the table for every group that's been created by a specific social profile ID, which is something that I completely forgot to add to the post request whenever we're actually creating them. So what I just did is I made it so on this field right here, when we first load this endpoint, we are loading the social profiles that are attached to our Cognito account and then setting them to a select field. So right here, the social profile is a drop down. If we had multiple, we can select them. But now we can select the social profile, and then the value attached to this is the actual ID. So here we're pulling the ID, which is a social profile ID, and then the name that people are seeing is going to be the screen name. So now whenever people create a group, we're going to actually see that here. As you see, I recreated a group and we see the social profile ID. Okay, so now that we have that, on our GET request, we are now scanning for all groups created by this user. So if we go over here and I run this, we're passing in the social profile ID, which is currently just hard-coded in for testing. We see that we get our group back. So if there were other groups in the table that did not have this exact social profile ID, then it wouldn't return those. It's just returning the one that we created because we passed in our social profile ID right there. Okay, so now I'm going to send these to a zip file. And actually, because it's just one file, I'm just going to edit this inline on the console. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a new function. That also means I need to create a new role and policy for access to scan this table, which we don't have a policy for yet. Okay, so I created this, and now I want to copy this name right here because this is what we're going to be naming our Lambda function. Let's go ahead and create the function. We're going to be using node 8.10, and then the role will be this one right here, the role that I just created. Now let's go ahead and click on create function. Then I'm going to copy this code right here, and we're going to paste it inline. So right in here, I'll simply paste that and save. And then I'll edit my tags and then edit the timeout to 5 seconds. And then let's go ahead and click on save. So now let's go ahead and add something to our API to access that endpoint. Let's create a method for get. We're going to attach this endpoint to the Lambda function that we just created, then click on save, and then add these new permissions like usual. Okay, now I'm going to go through and set this up like I did the other method. Okay, so I've deployed the API. We're going to copy this invoke URL, and then we're going to try it out in our application. So here we're listening to a GET request to /collaboration group. If they don't have the social profile ID, which is actually typed differently, then we're going to send a 422 error back saying that social profile ID is required. And this is just to make sure that we don't proceed further. So here we're going to say await rp.get. We're going to say the URI is this right here. And then actually let's use backticks, and then let's say social profile ID equals event.params.social profile ID. And then we could say the headers will have the same authorization that we use right here. Let's go ahead and just copy this. Then let's get the positive response. Let's simply log that for now. And then also response.send data. And then we can catch an error, and we will log that as well. And send that back. So let's save this. Let's go over here and let's refresh. Actually, we're not actually calling this. So what we want to do now is, seeing that we're here, we also want to do another GET request for collaboration group. Is it group or groups? Okay, so GET request to collaboration group. Okay, so then we're going to listen to if the response was successful. we're simply going to log that out, and then otherwise we're just going to catch the error and log that to the console as well. Let's save this. Let's go over here and let's refresh. Okay, so my own error was thrown back because I didn't actually attach a social profile ID. One thing I should do is when we're actually loading the social profile IDs, I can say first ID, and then here we can say if not first ID, then first ID equals ID, which is the actual social profile ID right here. Then after all of this is done, we can say if first ID. We can now pass in, you can use backticks to easily pass in our social profile ID, which will be first ID. So there could be a more elegant way to do this for the user experience, but for now we know that we only have one social profile ID, so we're just going to use the first one loaded like this. Let's go ahead and refresh here. Okay, so I also noticed that this should be request.query, and this right here, I had event beforehand, so getting mixed up with the Lambda function. But this would also obviously be request.query. So now that we have that, and our get request now has a social profile at the end of it, we see that the response is actually what we're looking for, and this is also passed back to the front end. So now I can go ahead and actually display some of this information as a group information here, but I'm going to do that off camera because it's not too useful. But that's pretty much it for this video. We now have both the ability to create collaboration groups on a Lambda function with your API gateway, and also the ability to view collaboration groups that we've previously created on the same platforms. So that's it. Thank you for watching.